I am Vanessa Corinne, born July 14th, 1989 in Louisiana, United States. I was raised inside a bloodline that secretly trained me to manipulate spirits against believers. I am not here to teach you theory. I am confessing what I personally did, what I released, and what I now regret with everything in me. We targeted people who prayed, people who fasted, people who carried light, and we sent spirit husbands to drain them in silence. Like this video now, comment now, share this now. Do not ignore this warning, because what I am about to reveal will expose what witches pray you never discover. Watch this until the very end, because if you leave early, you may miss the very psalm that would have broken what was sent to you. This is not normal knowledge. This is forbidden exposure, and what is about to be uncovered will shake you, awaken you, and arm you. You think spirit husbands come randomly. They do not. They are assigned. I remember the night clearly. We were gathered in a dim room, candles burning, names written, targets chosen. And listen carefully, we were never sent to unbelievers. Number, we were sent to those who prayed, those who fasted, those who carried spiritual fire, because those were the ones the kingdom of darkness feared the most. Your prayer life made you a target. Your purity made you a target. Your calling made you a target. And the assignment was always the same: send a spirit husband to weaken, delay, and drain. Not kill you immediately. Number, slow destruction, silent attacks, hidden oppression, and many of you never even realized what was happening. You just thought, why am I always tired? Why do I feel spiritually blocked? Why do I keep seeing the same dreams? Those were not random. We planted them. We released spirits that would visit you in dreams. They would appear familiar, sometimes even loving. But their mission was dark: to steal your strength, to corrupt your spiritual atmosphere, to disconnect you from divine flow. And the worst part? They thrived in silence. Because as long as you didn't understand what was happening, you couldn't fight it. That's why this revelation is dangerous to the enemy. Because once you know, you become a threat again. Now listen to me carefully. There was one thing we feared, one thing that made experienced witches uncomfortable, one thing that could break an assignment instantly: the book of Psalms. Not just reading it casually. Number, when a believer understood its power, when they spoke it with authority, when they declared it with fire, everything shifted. I saw it happen. Assignments would fail, spirits would retreat, connections would snap, and we would have to withdraw. Because songs are not just words, they are weapons, ancient, proven, feared. And the first psalm I will expose to you is one we were specifically warned about, because it dismantled spirit husband assignments at the root. It didn't just weaken them, it broke them. This psalm created a spiritual boundary, a line that spirits could not cross. And when someone activated it correctly, everything we sent began to collapse. This is Psalm 23. Most people know it, but they don't understand it. And that ignorance keeps them vulnerable. You've heard it before. You've probably repeated it casually. But we fear the ones who spoke it with revelation, because Psalm 23 is not comfort, it is authority. It declares ownership. The Lord is my shepherd. That statement alone was dangerous to us, because it means you are not spiritually abandoned, you are not unguarded, you are not accessible, you belong to a higher authority. And spirit husbands cannot operate freely when that authority is recognized and enforced. Do you understand what I am telling you? Many of you are being attacked not because you are weak, but because you are unaware. Psalm 23 continues, He restores my soul. That line destroyed one of our strongest operations, because spirit husbands feed on soul fragmentation, broken emotions, hidden wounds, unhealed trauma. That's where they enter. That's where they attach. But when restoration is declared, their access point begins to close. We hated that line because it meant healing was happening, and healing makes you dangerous. Then it says, even though I walk through the valley, notice that you walk through it. You don't stay there. Spirit husbands try to trap you in cycles, repeated dreams, repeated feelings, repeated patterns. But this psalm breaks cycles. It declares movement. It declares escape. It declares victory in motion. And then the line that caused panic in spiritual gatherings: you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Do you understand what that means? It means your enemies are forced to watch your elevation. They cannot stop it. They cannot block it. They cannot interfere. They are present but powerless. We feared believers who understood that, because once they stepped into that authority, everything we sent lost its grip. Spirit husbands could not dominate them anymore. The connection would weaken. The access would break. and eventually the assignment would die. I have seen it. I have watched spirits retreat in frustration because someone finally spoke Psalm 23 with understanding. Not fear, not doubt, authority. And that is what you must do. You cannot whisper this psalm. You cannot say it casually. You must declare it with force, with belief, with spiritual awareness. Because when you do, you are not just speaking words, you are enforcing divine ownership over your life. And once that ownership is established, no spirit husband can remain. This is just the beginning. What I am about to reveal next is even more feared. There is a psalm we were forbidden to hear spoken with understanding, not because it was long, not because it was popular, but because it carried judgment, immediate judgment. I remember one assignment that failed completely. We had marked a woman. She was consistent in prayer, but we found a door. Moment of weakness, emotional exhaustion, spiritual fatigue. That was enough. We sent a spirit husband. The dreams began, the heaviness followed. Her prayer life started weakening. Everything was going according to plan. Until one night, she changed something. She didn't cry, she didn't complain. She stood up, and she began to declare a psalm we feared deeply, Psalm 35. You may have read it before, but you did not see what we saw. Because Psalm 35 is not a prayer, it is a legal confrontation in the spirit. It calls for divine intervention against unseen enemies. It exposes hidden attackers. And when spoken with authority, it triggers spiritual resistance that darkness cannot ignore. The first line alone was enough to disrupt operations Contend, O Lord, with those who contend with me. Do you understand what that means? It is not you fighting anymore. It is God stepping into the battle. And once that happens, everything changes. We were trained to avoid believers who shifted battles away from themselves and handed them to God. Because when God contends, no spirit can stand, no assignment can survive, no manipulation can continue. That woman kept speaking, line after line, with force, with anger, with authority. She wasn't begging, she was enforcing judgment. Let those who seek my life be put to shame. That line hit hard. Because spirit husbands operate in secrecy. They thrive in hidden access. They function best when you don't see them. But this psalm exposes them. It drags them into light. And once exposed, their power weakens. We felt it immediately. The connection began to shake. The spirit assigned to her became unstable. It could no longer maintain control. Because exposure destroys manipulation. And then she declared, let them be like chaff before the wind. That was it. That was the breaking point. Because that line doesn't just resist, it expels, it scatters, it removes completely. Spirit husbands cannot survive in that atmosphere. They lose direction, they lose grounding, they lose attachment, they are forced out. And that is exactly what happened. The spirit left, the assignment collapsed, and we could not re enter. The door was closed permanently. You need to understand something. Many of you are fighting wrong. You're trying to resist quietly, you're trying to endure silently. But that is not how you break spiritual assignments. Silence does not scare darkness. Authority does. Declaration does. Spiritual confrontation does. Psalm 35 is not passive. It is aggressive. It is direct. It is confrontational. And that is why witches avoid people who use it correctly. Because it shifts the entire atmosphere. It turns defense into offense. It moves you from victim to authority. And spirit husbands cannot dominate someone who knows how to confront spiritually. Let me tell you something deeper. We monitored believers, we observed patterns, and we categorized them. There were those who prayed emotionally, there were those who prayed religiously, and then there were those who prayed with authority. The last group was dangerous because they understood what they were doing. They didn't just speak words, they enforced them. And Psalm 35 was one of their strongest weapons. If you are dealing with repeated attacks, strange dreams, unexplainable spiritual fatigue, you cannot afford to stay passive. You must rise, you must speak, you must confront, not in fear, in authority. Because when you declare Psalm 35 with understanding, you are not asking for help, you are invoking divine judgment. And once that judgment is activated, every hidden enemy begins to scatter. Every illegal connection begins to break. Every assigned spirit begins to lose power. This is not theory. I have seen it. I have experienced it. And I am warning you now, if you begin to use this psalm correctly, what was sent to you will not survive. But what comes next is even more dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. Because it doesn't just fight enemies, blocks access completely. There is a level of protection we could not penetrate, not delay. not weaken, not manipulate, completely blocked. And whenever we encountered it, we withdrew immediately. No negotiation, no second attempt. Because we knew this person was covered, not casually, fully. The psalm behind that level of protection was Psalm 91. You have heard it, but you have not activated it. Because if you had, some of the things you are experiencing right now would not still be happening. Let me tell you what we saw from the other side. When someone truly stepped into Psalm 91, it was like a spiritual shield formed around them, not symbolic, real, dense, impenetrable, alive. The first line alone created a barrier. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High, that word dwells was the key. Not visits, not occasionally praise. Dwells, lives there, remains there. Because spirit husbands look for inconsistency. Moments where you step out of alignment, moments where your guard drops. That's when they enter, that's when they attach. But when someone dwells in that secret place, there is no opening, no access point, no legal ground. We couldn't find a way in. And that frustrated us. Because no matter how strong the assignment, no matter how experienced the witch, we could not override that covering. Then comes the next line, he shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Do you understand shadow in the spirit? It means proximity, closeness, constant covering. Spirit husbands operate best at a distance when you feel disconnected, when you feel alone, when you feel spiritually exposed. But this psalm destroys that illusion because it establishes constant divine presence. And when that presence is active, darkness cannot coexist. We tried, we sent stronger spirits, we intensified the attacks, but it didn't matter. Because Psalm 91 doesn't just resist, it secures. Then it declares 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. That line terrified new initiates because it revealed something we didn't want believers to know. You can be surrounded by attacks and still remain untouched. Do you hear that? Attacks can happen around you, but not land on you. That is the power of spiritual covering. That is the authority of divine protection. And spirit husbands cannot function when they cannot touch their target. They lose purpose. They lose influence. They lose control, and eventually they are forced to withdraw. I witnessed a case once. A man was targeted heavily, repeated attempts, different strategies. Nothing worked. Why? Because every night he declared Psalm 91, not casually, with understanding, with authority, with consistency. And over time, a barrier formed, a spiritual atmosphere we could not enter. The spirits assigned to him became restless. They could not connect. They could not attach. They could not influence. And one by one, they left because there was nothing left to do. You need to understand something critical. Spirit husbands require access. They need entry points, open doors, unprotected spaces. Psalm 91 shuts all of that down completely. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't delay. It blocks. But here is where many of you are missing it. You read it, but you don't dwell in it. You repeat it, but you don't believe it. You know it, but you don't enforce it. And that difference is everything, because the power is not in the words alone. It is in the authority behind them. It is in the consistency. It is in the understanding. When you truly activate Psalm 91, you are not just praying, you are establishing territory. You are declaring boundaries. You are enforcing access control over your life. And once that is done, no spirit husband can enter, no assignment can attach, no manipulation can survive. This is why we avoided those who lived in this psalm, because they were not easy targets. They were not vulnerable. They were covered fully. Someone is fully covered. Darkness has no advantage, no leverage, no victory. But what I am about to reveal next goes even deeper, because it doesn't just protect you, it cleanses what has already entered. There is something many of you do not realize. Protection is powerful, but what happens when something has already entered? What happens when the attack is no longer outside, but inside your atmosphere, inside your dreams, inside your emotions, inside your patterns? That is where many believers are trapped, because they pray for protection while carrying contamination. And spirit husbands thrive in that condition, because once they gain access, they don't rush. They settle, they build influence slowly. They create cycles, dream encounters, emotional attachments, spiritual confusion. And over time, you start to feel like something is wrong, but you can't explain it. I remember how we were trained. Once a spirit husband successfully entered, we shifted the strategy. No more force. Now it was about maintenance. Keep the connection alive. Keep the access open. Keep the victim unaware. Because awareness leads to resistance. and resistance leads to expulsion. That's why we needed believers to stay confused, to think it was stress, to think it was normal, to think it was nothing. But there was one psalm that completely disrupted this stage. It didn't just resist, it cleansed deeply, completely, irreversibly. This is Psalm 51. And I need you to understand this clearly. Psalm 51 is not weakness, it is not just repentance, it is spiritual purification. And purification is deadly to anything unclean. The moment someone began to declare Psalm 51 with true understanding, we felt it immediately, because it targeted the exact environment that spirit husbands depend on. Listen carefully, create in me a clean heart. That line is not emotional, it is surgical. Because spirit husbands attach to unclean spaces, hidden pain, unresolved guilt, secret struggles. That is their anchor. That is how they stay connected. But when cleansing begins, that anchor starts to break. We saw it happen. Connections that took weeks to build started weakening in moments, because purity removes compatibility. And when there is no compatibility, there is no connection. Then comes the next line, renew a right spirit within me. This is where things became dangerous for us, because renewal replaces what was corrupted. It resets your spiritual condition. It restores alignment. And spirit husbands cannot operate in a restored environment. They lose influence. They lose familiarity. They lose access. It's like being forced out of a place you no longer belong. And that is exactly what happens. I remember a specific case. A young woman had been under attack for months. Dreams, fatigue, confusion, everything was working. The connection was stable. Then one day, she changed her approach. She stopped fighting outwardly and started cleansing inwardly. She began declaring Psalm 51 daily, not rushed, not distracted, deeply, intentionally. And within days, everything started shifting. The dreams reduced, the heaviness lifted, the connection weakened, because the environment we relied on was being purified. And we couldn't stop it, because this psalm doesn't attack directly, it transforms the host. Do you understand how powerful that is? Instead of fighting the spirit, it removes what the spirit feeds on. And once that is gone, the spirit cannot survive. It has nothing to hold on to, nothing to connect with, nothing to influence. So it leaves, not by force, but by incompatibility. This is why many of you are struggling. You are trying to rebuke without cleansing. You are trying to fight without transforming. And that creates a cycle. Temporary relief followed by repeated attacks, because the root is still there. Psalm 51 removes the root. It purifies the core. It restores your spiritual foundation. And once your foundation is clean, nothing unclean can remain. This is why we feared believers who understood this psalm, because they didn't just resist, they became untouchable. Not because of defense, but because of purity. And purity is something darkness cannot override. You need to take this seriously, because if there is anything operating in your life, anything attached, anything lingering, this is the psalm that will cleanse it out completely. But what I am about to reveal next is even more aggressive, because it doesn't just cleanse, it hunts down and destroys hidden enemies. There is a level of warfare most believers never reach, not because they cannot, but because they were never taught how. They defend, they endure, they survive, but they do not pursue. And that is exactly how spirit husbands continue to operate. Because as long as you stay in defense, they stay in control. I remember the shift. The moment we realized the believer was no longer just resisting, but had started hunting spiritually, everything changed. Because now they were no longer the target. They became the threat. And there was one psalm that marked that transition clearly. Psalm 18. This psalm is not soft, it is not reflective, it is war, pure war. And when someone activated it correctly, it didn't just break connections, it chased down everything that was sent. I saw it happen. A man we had targeted for a long time suddenly shifted. Before that, he was struggling. Fatigue, delays, strange patterns. Everything we released was working. But then he stopped reacting emotionally. He stopped praying passively. And one night, he stood up and began declaring Psalm 18. Not quietly, not casually, with force, with fire, with authority. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. That opening alone established something dangerous. It declared stability, strength, unshakable positioning. Spirit husbands rely on instability, emotional weakness, spiritual inconsistency. But this psalm removed that advantage instantly. Then he continued. I call upon the Lord, so shall I be saved from my enemies. That line triggered something. Because now, this was no longer a silent battle. This was a declared confrontation. And once confrontation begins, darkness cannot hide. Then came the moment that changed everything. I pursued my enemies and overtook them. Do you hear that? He didn't just resist, he pursued. That is what we fear. Because spirit husbands are designed to attack, not to be chased, not to be hunted, not to be overtaken. When that shift happens, they lose control completely. The one who was supposed to be weak becomes dominant. The one who was supposed to be drained becomes aggressive. And that reversal breaks the entire assignment. We felt it immediately. The atmosphere changed. The connection destabilized. The spirit assigned to him became defensive. Do you understand what that means? The attacker became the one under pressure. That is what Psalm 18 does. It reverses roles. It flips the battle. It transfers authority back to you. And when authority is restored, everything illegal must leave. He continued declaring, "You armed me with strength for battle." That line activated empowerment, not emotional strength, spiritual strength. The kind that cannot be drained, the kind that cannot be manipulated, the kind that makes you dangerous again. And when that strength rises, spirit husbands cannot feed, they cannot attach, they cannot operate. Because the entire system depends on your weakness. Once weakness is removed, they collapse. And that is exactly what happened. Within days, everything broke. The dreams stopped. The heaviness disappeared. The delays lifted because the source of the attack had been pursued and destroyed. This is what many of you are missing. You are trying to survive what you were meant to conquer. You are tolerating what you were given authority to destroy. Psalm 18 is not for passive believers. It is for those who are ready to take their authority back, to rise, confront, to pursue, to overtake. Because once you enter that level, you are no longer a victim. You become a spiritual force that darkness cannot handle. And spirit husbands, they cannot stay where they are being hunted. They cannot operate where they are being pursued. They cannot survive where authority is enforced. This is why we avoided people who activated this psalm. Because once they did, the assignment was already over. But there is one final psalm, the one we feared the most. Because it doesn't just fight, it seals everything permanently. No return, no re-entry, no second attack. There is a final level, not resistance, not cleansing, not even pursuit, sealing, permanent closure. The point where an attack cannot return even if it tries. This is where we lost completely, not temporarily, not partially, completely. Because there was nothing left to work with, no access, no connection, no doorway. I remember when I first witnessed this level, we had launched multiple attempts on one individual, different strategies, different timings, different spirits. Everything failed, not slowed, failed, and we didn't understand why, until we observed closely. This person was not just praying, they were establishing something, a covering so complete that nothing could penetrate it. And the psalm behind that level was Psalm 121. This psalm may seem simple to you, short, direct, calm. But what we saw was terrifying. Because Psalm 121 doesn't just fight enemies, it establishes divine surveillance, constant, unbroken, uninterrupted. I lift up my eyes to the hills, where does my help come from? That line alone shifts your focus away from the problem to the source. And once your focus is aligned, your authority follows. Then comes the declaration, "My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth." That statement establishes origin. Not human help, not temporary help, divine help, unlimited, unrestricted. And spirit husbands cannot compete with divine authority at that level. But what truly destroyed every assignment was this: He will not let your foot slip. Do you understand what that means? No mistake, no accidental opening, no unnoticed access. Because many attacks don't come through force, they come through small openings, moments of weakness, moments of distraction, moments of vulnerability. That's where we entered. But this psalm closes even those moments. It secures your steps, it stabilizes your path, it removes vulnerability. And without vulnerability, there is no entry point. Then comes the line that ended everything: "He who watches over you will not slumber." That is what we feared most, because it means constant surveillance, no gaps, no breaks, no moments of exposure. We relied on timing, waiting for moments when your guard dropped. But this psalm removes that possibility completely, because the one covering you never sleeps, never pauses, never looks away. Do you understand what that means for any assignment? it means it cannot succeed ever. Then it continues, the Lord will keep you from all harm, not some, all. That is total coverage, total protection, total sealing. And when that level is activated, everything stops. Spirit husbands cannot return, they cannot re enter, they cannot attempt again, because the environment is permanently secured. I witnessed spirits attempt to return and fail instantly. No connection, no access, no response. It was like hitting a wall that could not be broken. And eventually, they gave up completely because there was nothing left to do. That is the power of this psalm. It doesn't just fight, it finishes, it seals. It closes every door permanently. This is what you must understand. Many of you have experienced temporary breakthroughs only to face the same attacks again. Why? Because the door was never sealed. It was closed but not secured. Psalm 121 secures it forever. It establishes a level of divine covering that cannot be bypassed. And once that is in place, are no longer accessible, not occasionally, completely. This is the psalm we feared the most, because once someone truly activated it, we knew it was over. No second chance, no re-entry, no recovery. The assignment was dead, permanently. And now, you know what we never wanted you to know. You are no longer unaware, and that changes everything. What was attacking you has now lost its advantage. Stand up in your authority and declare these psalms without fear, because what once had access no longer has permission. Comment now and declare your freedom boldly. Do not stay silent after receiving this level of revelation. Share this message with urgency, because someone close to you is still under attack and does not know what you now know. You stayed until the very end for a reason. This was your moment of awakening, your moment of release, your moment of victory. Nothing sent against you will remain, nothing assigned to you will survive, and from this moment forward, you walk in irreversible dominion.